Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Bison Break. I'm your host, Brendan Whitted. And look, every week we got somebody really special that joins us, but this is super special, especially for a guy that went to Howard, a guy that's like myself from North Carolina. So this is doubly special. And I think the first time we've had a person that was connected to former guests. So we've had Jim Trotter on, we've had Marcus Matthews on, and now we have the great Ed Hill on, sports information director for Howard for very, very many years. Legendary. Mr. Hill, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, and it's an honor to be on this today.
Man, I can't express what this means. I've been hearing your name kind of like whispered throughout the streets for a second, and the fact that you made time for us, it really, really means a lot. But before I get into the many accolades that you have, multiple Hall of Famer in multiple scenarios, before I get into all that, this is Bison Break. So we got to pull back the curtain a little bit, figure out a little bit more about you before we get into all the sports stuff. So, all right. So, got a few like get to know you sort of questions. So, all right. So this is the first one. So if I gave you a show and you talk to everybody, you know everybody. If I gave you your own interview show, hey man, this is your interview show. Who is the first person that you're going to have on as a guest?
Boy, that is a tough question.
We go hard in Bison Break now.
That's a tough question. Only because there's so many viable candidates.
Right.
I would say, without offending anyone. Now, let me ask you this: would it have to be an athlete or
no,
a student? I think probably one of the better interviews would be Elena Bergeron.
Ooh.
Elena Bergeron, who is now editor with the New York Times. She actually assigns NFL writers to cover the NFL. But I've known her since she came to Howard from New Orleans, and she kind of showed up in my office and answered an ad about volunteer help, internship, and she came in and right away she covered the baseball. She coordinated the press box pregame operations, and her growth is meteoric. I mean, from that, she went to WSA TV9 as an intern. And Brandon, she actually, her senior year, she covered, and a lot of people probably don't have this opportunity, she actually covered what was then the McDonald's Classic. And in the McDonald's, this particular one, there it was LeBron James in there and Carmelo Anthony, and she interviewed both of them. I never forget it. But she was at the Washington Post doing some things, and she was also doing some stuff with ESPN. So what happened is that she had a tough choice, and the choices was either the ESPN, the magazine, I don't know if you remember that or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the Washington Post, and the Washington Post went hard after her. So she ultimately accepted a position as a senior editor with ESPN, the magazine, and the rest is history. I mean, she went on from there. She was like executive something for SB Nation, which you mean.
Oh, nice.
She's quickly, and like I say, now that's big time. She's actually, assigning reporters, to cover NFL. And I say that because her interview, she's very interesting in terms of how she approaches, being a woman in the profession, her knowledge, her expertise, and she's very unassuming at it. And that she'll be a great interview. There's a lot of others too, but off the top, as you asked me that, she would be, I think, one of the tops, just because of her ability to handle interviews the way she does.
Well, look, anytime you want to throw more interesting Howard alum that are doing things, and there are so many, and you have already put me on to so many. So thank you for that. Off gate. Okay. Question number 2. So you've been in DC for a nice little second. do you have a favorite mumbo sauce that you've had while being here in DC? Because it changes a little bit depending on where you go. Do you have a favorite one?
Okay, so back in the day, they had a joint, that's a DC lingo. They had a joint called Wings and Things. They had about 5 or 6 of them in the DC. In fact, they had one right there at Florida and Georgia, down the street from Howard.
Yeah.
So the Wings and Things, you get 3 wings on bread, and it was something like $1.25, which is ridiculous now, right? As I tell you this. But the mumbo sauce was what brought everybody up. The wings were average, the bread was whatever, but the mumbo sauce was the talk of the city. You been to wings thing? Oh yeah, and you know, people hanging out Friday night, Saturday night, partying, whatever they did stuff. That was the spot because they stayed open till like 3 or 4 in the morning. And people, there was one on Florida and Georgia. And there was another one right there on 14th and U, which was another busy area. And every time you went there, it would be like crowded because everybody there was get those wings and the mumbo sauce. So that was the favorite place for me, Wings and Things.
I love it. I love it. All right, well, you know, I opened this joint up saying that I'm from North Carolina, you from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Cat over here.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So you know, it's all love. You know, it's all love. So
Right.
I asked you about the mama sauce. So I gotta ask you, do you have a Bojangles order that's a go-to?
Hey, what? I'm sorry.
Bojangles order that's a go-to?
You know, actually, I discovered Bojangles itself when I was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because I spent a year there with the Winston-Salem Chronicle newspaper as a reporter, and I didn't know about Bojangles at that time, and I went there and I really liked the biscuits. The biscuits were real Southern biscuits.
That's love right there.
They weren't the fake joints that you get at McDonald's on the egg, whatever like that. It was the serious biscuit, and the chicken was cool, you know, but it was the biscuit that made everything at Bojangles.
That's how you know you from North Cat, right there. Like that's it right there. Like there's no way to explain that. I remember trying to explain that to folks. I was like, yeah, I understand that this is a biscuit, but like down home, like when I was first at Howard, I was like, nah, I understand. This is a biscuit, I get it. But like biscuits mean a little bit different once you get to North Cat and everything. It means a little bit different. So that, yes, those biscuits really hit super special. Okay. All right. So you have a wealth of knowledge, but talk to me a little bit about how you got to be Howard's sports information director. And also talk to me about what is a sports information director for those that don't.
Okay. Basically, a sports information director is a sort of a inflated word for media relations director for athletics. So basically what you do, you keep statistics, historical records, coordinating interviews with athletes for TV, radio, and other media. And like, as I say, keeping records, writing the media guides to inform everybody what's going on, alumni, media, game day programs so people can know what's going on if Howard is playing Hampton, and a number of other duties and responsibilities. There's so many you can't even, and I never even thought about it before I got into the profession. So that's kind of an overview of what a sports information director does.
Y'all are so integral to anyone that's having any sort of real writing or covering of a team or of a sport, because as a person that writes very frequently about sports, one of my actually, this is probably a better breakdown of it. One of my best friends who works for a News and Observer in Raleigh, North Carolina, Jonas Pope, he says the most important thing to do, the most important thing that I learned early on was to have a relationship with the sports and information director, because they're so vital and so crucial to anything that you read and anything that any sort of coverage. It's that they're vital and integral to that media outlet.
So, you know, one of the things about that, Brandon, is that it's interesting, you know, that observation of Jonas, because when things go well, when a sport or a game or an event or an athlete is promoted, everybody's like, oh, but nobody pays attention to who was the author of that, right?
Right.
But let something go wrong with statistics or some misinformation. Oh, that was sports information. So it's that timeline there stuff. I learned that a long time ago. And as you were talking, my training, one of the great things when I worked with the Washington Post as a reporter, one of the mistakes I made early and I learned from was that I started out covering high school sports. And most of the games, football, basketball, they were on Friday evenings. So I would do the story after the covered event. We didn't have computers back then, no laptops, none of that. We didn't have cell phones, so you had to find a phone and sometimes dictate the story to the editors, and then they would clean it up and it would run the next day. So what happens when with high school kids 16, 17, 18, and coaches, they're in the building sometimes, physical education. So a star player made an important play or during the game, you write his name and write up just his quotes and stuff. Always be careful, this is what I learned, to make sure you get the correct spelling, right? Because I've got calls a couple of times on that Saturday morning. They would call me and said, hey, you got the mother just called and say that is not the correct spelling. So I stopped depending on the coaches for that. And I would go straight to when I interviewed that athlete, I would say, now let me get the correct spelling of your name. Very important, very vital,
When you mentioned your time at the Post, how did you end up at Howard working for Sports Information?
So I was kind of doing some things at UDC with their Sports Information, and I had the honor, the privilege of meeting Donald Huff. He's a legend. He's an icon. Donald Huff was the first African American to cover high school sports and be a writer for the Washington Post. In fact, they actually named an award after him.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, so Donald was from the area, and he made a transition from the DC public school system where he was a physical education teacher. And we met kind of then because he was highly successful in sports. And so when he got with the Post, we were at an event and he was talking to me and he said, well, you interested? And I said, well, I like writing. And, he says, well, look, we got, I'm going to see if I can set something up for you so you can come there and be a news aide. And I was like, cool, okay. So once I got to the Washington Post, I was very fortunate because he taught me the ropes. He introduced me to people. And like I said, I started out doing high school sports. And as I progressed in a couple of years' time, I began to write feature stories. And it was for another section newspaper. It was called The Weekly at that time. So I was doing stories for the Post, regular sports, but also they had started something to do features on, roller skaters or skiers or people, or track and field performers. And I would go do feature stories on how they got into it. And so that's how I kind of developed my skill set in terms of in the Post. I was doing some things there, but after about 2 years, a little less 2 years, an opportunity presented itself in Winston-Salem. And it was a Black weekly. And it's relatively new, but they had a lot of good ideas. And they also had a tabloid. People don't even know what that means now. They had a tabloid that was called the Black College Sports Review. It came out once a month, and it covered CIAA, MEAC, SWAC, SIAC, and independence. And so that's when I got a chance. But I was also with that newspaper. I was covering politics, community services, all kinds of different things. And it enabled me to expand my writing skills, my interviewing skills. And I wasn't making a lot of money, but the experience was unbelievable because I got a chance to do some networking. And I was really proud because during that time, I actually did the first story on Jerry Rice. No one knew who Jerry Rice was.
And he went to Mississippi Valley State, right?
Mississippi Valley State. And so Jerry Rice actually caught 39 passes his freshman year in the SWAC. And at that time, the SWAC had some great receivers, great defensive backs. And so I pursued a story on him. So I found out he was from Crawford, Mississippi, that he was, even though he had a great high school career, he was in the 2A. And so Mississippi and Ole Miss, Mississippi State, they chose not to recruit him because he was 6'1", 165 pounds, soaking wet. Had gaudy numbers, but
Yeah.
so he gets to Mississippi Valley State and he gets with Archie Cooley. So he catches 39 passes, and I did an article on him, a feature actually for USA Today, because I sold them the story. So at any rate, what happened was Jerry Rice, his father, was a brick mason. And he learned his work ethic and he became ambidextrous because when you're a brick maker, they would throw bricks and that kind of thing. So that was part of his, and so the next year he caught 90 passes, then he caught 103 and then 123. And I think those records still stand in college football. And I don't know if anyone will ever, be able to, and I also did a story during that time on Steve Air McNair, because a lot of people didn't know who he was. And Steve McNair,
Alcorn State.
Yeah, but he was in Mississippi and at even Florida State was looking to recruit him, but they wanted to make him a defensive back, a safety, because he was a big guy. He was about 6'2", about 200 pounds, and didn't have an ounce of fat on him. He was just unbelievable. And I always tell people my journey was as a freshman. Howard played Alcorn State in what was then the Circle City Classic. And the Circle City Classic arguably could be talked in the same breath as Bayou Classic in terms of popularity, number of people. So anyway, so Howard's playing Alcorn. And I'm in the press box, and I like to get there early, 2 hours, hour and a half before the game. And there's a scout from the NFL there. He's with the New York Giants. So as we're in the press box, he's talking about Cedric Tillman and Torrance Small, who were two receivers for Alcorn State, guys with different kind of skills, but NFL guys. So he was just giving me some rundown on what they look for, et cetera, et cetera. So while we're sitting there, Brandon, we're watching in the warm-up, the pregame, this quarterback, he's throwing 30-yard across the field darts. He's throwing 50-yard past that field with it flicking it. And so we're watching it. And as the game progresses and the game starts, I was like, we look at each other like, who is this dude? So we look at the roster. I said, he can't be a freshman because his body was unbelievable and his ability. And I said, that guy, they're going to play in the pros. And so he ended up only throwing for 427 yards that day against Howard.
I mean, something light, not heavy.
They pounded us. So we ended up playing them 3 times and during his career, and Howard went 2-1 again. The next 2 times they won. So one of my big moments during my career at Howard was we played Alcorn State at Howard at Green Stadium. And so at that time, he and Jay Walker were the 2 quarterbacks, and both of them were hot. I mean, like that. But a lot of people, other than the people in the SWAC and MUSA, didn't know about them like that. So I called Mike Wilbon, my former colleague and friend of Post. I said, man, look, you got to come out and see this game. So the game, and I sent a lot of information. I said, these are the best 2 black quarterbacks and blah, blah, So the next thing I know, Brandon, when you go back and look at that day of the game, there were people on the rooftops of the School of Business, on the top of Byrd Gymnasium, people all along the fences. It was unbelievable. It was big time college football. So in the game, Howard jumps on top of them 32-6, right? 32-6. So this is one of my anecdotes. We had a player by the name of Neil Downey. And so Neil was a safety and was very well known for his antics. So sometime during the game, he steals McNair's towel that he liked to wear around his waist. And he goes and gives his mother in the stands. Big mistake. McNair was fired up. He came out in the second half, and look, Brandon, he was a grown man. He was stiff-arming Howard people. He was throwing on the run. He was throwing out of the pocket. So the next thing you know, the game is 38-36. So on the last possession, the crowd, I mean, everybody's like in a frenzy now, because at first it was like a blowout, everybody excited. But all of a sudden now, and they have the ball, and he has the ball at the 20-yard, first down at his own 20. And so 3 downs, and so on 4th down, they went for it. And he had a tall wide receiver that killed us all day long. 6'6", got a shot in the NFL, named Marcus Tillman. So I'm going to set it up for you. So he drops back at the 26-yard line, his own 26, and he rolls, and he didn't heave it. He flicked his wrist, and the ball is going down, and the big receiver is running, and the back of the end zone. Mm-hmm. He's almost right there before we get there, and the ball is like literally inches outstretched of his hand, stuff like that. And the crowd was like, and and I have those number of times, so I'm gonna share this quickly with another time. So it's 1993, and Howard is coming off a big win over Townsend, and Townsend was ranked at that time. It was their homecoming. Jay Walker throws a touchdown pass to Jermaine Kahn with 6 seconds left to beat them at Townsend. So Howard was undefeated at 5-0. So they're playing their hated rivals the following week, the Aggies. But not only were they playing them, it was the Aggies' homecoming, right? And they were also undefeated. Both were ranked in the then Sheridan poll, and both got votes in the national poll. So the week before the game, I had talked to BET, because at that time they were the only one doing it. So I said, look, begin to see. I said, y'all got to do something on Howard. But somehow Howard didn't appeal to them. They did some games, and if it's a Circle City Classic, but they didn't really like coming to Howard's campus, nonetheless. So I said, I said this in the beginning of the season. So that Tuesday, I sent something out to USA Today, and they had this thing called Small College Game of the Week. So I kind of hyped it up a little bit about this big 2 undefeated Howard coming out, a come from behind. Jay Walker was a national 1AA player of the week. And so all of a sudden, BT calls on Wednesday. We've got to do this game. We've got to do this game, right? So and it was like Charlie Neal and Lim Barney. So, so they made a decision to do the game. So I get down to Greensboro first of all, I set my reservations up. We had to stay an hour away from Greensboro because it was Aggie's homecoming. They were playing the hated rivals Howard and the Furniture Mart. You familiar with that? The Furniture Mart was going on simultaneously. So I get there to the stadium, and the game is a 1:30 kickoff. I get there 11 o'clock because I let get there early. I get there are 5,000 people outside that can't get in. It's already crowded. So I get in there and work my way up to the press box. So I look out, and there's a group of Howard people on the visitor side, and they had their blue and white, and but everywhere you could look with a eye could see, it was that blue and gold from the Aggies. So it's a true story. So that always late arriving Howard band goes up like about midway through the first quarter. Meanwhile, the Aggies sold their seats where they traditionally sit at the reserve section. So they actually had to stand up during the game when they got there. And so they performed it. So the game comes out. Howard jumps on top, 21-7. The Aggies come back and tie the game. Second half, it goes up. The Aggies go up 35-21. So then Jay Walker leads Howard on 2 of those important drives that only he could do. So I'm in the press box, and Jesse Jackson, who's an Aggie, he's running around going crazy in there, right? And the Aggie fans, so Howard ties the game, and it goes into overtime. Now, so what happened was Howard, fortunately, had played. This was when they first instituted the overtime rule, because FAMU and Hampton made them change the rule because they went into an 8 overtime game. And NCAA said, no, we can't keep doing that. Like, so they changed the rules. So A&T had never played in an overtime game. So they come out, you flip the coin. So Howard deferred, and A&T gets the ball at the 25-yard line. And then you go until you get a first down, a touchdown, whatever. So Howard held them. They went for a field goal. They were awfully terribly right, much to the delight of Howard. So Howard gets the ball at the 25. And so Jay Walker, who might be one of the most cerebral quarterbacks in the history of the MEAC. So I'm going to set it up for you. So Mel Swan and Spencer Gwynn were doing play-by-play in color, respectively, for the Aggies. So I'm in the press box, because it's a small press box, and I'm behind him, and Jesse's running around. So they get the ball, and I'm going to pick up the play-by-play from Mel Swan. The Bison, they have the ball. Walker looks over the Aggie defense. He calls out the signals. He gets a snap. He's running. He scores. So Brandon, I look out, and it's this surreal view of all those Aggie fans, and they're saying, oh my God, what happened? Please don't tell us that we just lost to the hated Bison. Please tell us that we got another chance, stuff like that. It was unbelievable. So Bill Hayes was the coach of A&T. And after the game, after I did all my work and everything, I'm headed out. And so, over 75% of the Aggie faithful, they were inebriated. So they were pissed and everything. They had the tailgate and stuff like. So I overhear them, and they were like, "Oh, dumb coach." They 6-1, but he's a dumb coach because he lost to Howard. But that was it. That's just the way it went. It was dramatic, man. It was unbelievable. I mean, it's probably one of the better games in the history of HBCU football. Unbelievable.
I'm gonna definitely have to cut that up and send it to my dad, who was an Aggie. So thank you so much for that story, because that is 100% about to go in the family group me. 100%.
And before I end it, whenever I go down to A&T or see Aggie stuff, they still talk about that game. They still talk about it, like, they played numerous times since then.
Right.
But that game it leaves a nasty taste in their mouth. And Jay Walker lets them know it every time he does one of their games.
Good, as he should, as a legendary player should. So if I were to give you 30 seconds, a minute, to talk about the importance of alumni to the HBCU experience, because that is a perfect segue. The alumni to the HBCU experience, and particularly for giving, because always bisonexpress.org. Please give. The more you give, the more we get. Just if I give you 30 seconds, just talk to me a little bit about the importance of the alumni to our sports programs.
Well, I think that it's proven now in 2022, a time when there's more consciousness out there toward HBCUs and their contribution at all levels, in all different areas, is really important, because there's a time now where people are willing to give, to invest in, and support HBCU athletics. And I think, a lot of credit goes to Dion, because he's kind of, rang that bell. But I think, in the past, a lot of alums have been reluctant and made up excuses. Well, I didn't have a good experience, or this, that. But I think, to sit back on Atlanta on August the 27th and see the Bison performing before a national audience like that, I think it's well worth it, and to get, the basketball programs that go to the NCAA, get behind them, support them, and stop complaining about when they're not winning or the facilities, and do something, add a little something here and there, and you can make a world of difference. Because trust me, Brandon, there are literally thousands of Howard alums, athletes and non-athletes, who are making well into 6 figures. And to give 5,000 here, 10,000 there, stuff like, to write it off, to invest back into your university, into the athletic program, will mean a lot to our future and the continued rise in the prominence and the popularity of HBCU sports.
Mr. Hill, I can't express what it means that you made time for us. I had heard about a little bit about like how legendary you were, but honestly, I could talk for hours to you about being a Bison. You know what I mean? Like you're from North Carolina, which I didn't even know before before I started putting some stuff together about this interview. So which, that only ingratiates you more with me. So I want to have you on again. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you so much for being such a value part. I didn't even get into all the Hall of Fame credentials. You were college sports information director of America, MEAC Hall of Fame. Like, you have numerous awards that I don't even have time for, but thank you. Honestly, just thank you for what you've done previously. Thank you for the time that you spent now. And we have to have you back on again, because no, you have a wealth of knowledge that I feel like other people need to know about, because this is some great stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And let me just say this in closing here. There are so many high-profile former student athletes from Howard who I think would lend a lot and add much to your podcast. So, hit me up and I'll develop a list. I got contact information, and I think it would broaden what you're trying to do and let us try to get people more excited about giving, the Bison Express and contributing to the program.
Don't throw at me with a good time. Don't throw at me with a good time, good sir, because I will 100% be doing it, absolutely, and I'm going to take you up on that. Thank you so much, Mr. Hill. As always, guys, bisonexpress.org/giving. Give. We have a special program going on right now to give to the van program to get our athletes to and from their destinations for these contests and these competitions that they're going to. bisonexpress.org/giving. Thanks so much, Mr. Hill. I look forward to speaking to you more in the future.
Thank you. My pleasure.